Story number 1. He Stares. I was called by my son's school in the middle of the day. I was busy at work, so at first the fact that they were calling me made me very angry. I'm a single mother to a 6-year-old boy. His father is around, but he's like Santa Claus that only shows up every other weekend and on holidays to spoil him rotten and then leave when he gets bored. I love my son, and he's usually an angel, so getting called by his school in the middle of the day was odd. At first, I was angry at my son. I was angry at the school. I'm at the point where my little angel can't do anything wrong, so my initial thought wasn't that he was in any sort of trouble. I leaned against the counter, hiding my face and pressing the phone to my ear as my manager shot dagger eyes in my direction. We weren't allowed to use our phones during the company's time, unless for emergencies. He didn't consider my son getting called to the principal's office an emergency. After a few minutes on hold, I finally got through to the principal. What he told me both confused the hell out of me and chilled me to the bone. The principal informed me that my son had been caught doodling in class during a test instead of doing his actual schoolwork. This was the part that confused me. I'd been caught doodling in class before. I'd been caught skipping class before. It usually isn't cause for a trip to the principal's office and a call to the parents. This was when I started getting angry. My son isn't the easiest child to deal with. He has anxiety and panic attacks often, and sometimes it doesn't even help that he's on so many different medications. I always thought the school made up issues with my son just because it was too difficult for them to deal with him and his attacks. My anger came out in my voice when I yelled at the principal for calling me at work over such a small matter. When he managed to get a word in, he managed to shut me up with just one word. He said the reason they were calling me wasn't because my son was caught doodling during a test. It was the nature of his drawing that concerned them. He said that my son's drawing was disturbing. Like I said, this kind of sent shivers down my spine. I could feel the manager's eyes burning a hole in the back of my skull, and I knew he wouldn't let me off work early because of a disturbing drawing. I had to tell the school that I could only deal with the matter when I went to go pick him up at the end of the day. I wish I hadn't have left it like that. The word the principal used stuck with me for the rest of the day. How could a drawing be disturbing? I tried to imagine all different things it could be. I couldn't think of anything a 6-year-old could draw that could be described with that word. Anyway, I finally clocked out of work and rushed to the school to pick up my son. They had kept him in the principal's office all day, and his teacher led me straight there. When I got there, my son was sitting at a table, happy and content, completely oblivious to anything that was going on around him. The principal didn't waste any time in handing me the drawing my son was caught making during the test. At first, the drawing seemed innocent enough. Then, I saw it. I didn't know what it was, but the sight of it made my legs weak and sent chills running all over my body. The longer I stared at the drawing, the more it disturbed me. I glanced at my son, happily drawing with the crayons and paper the teacher had given him. The things he was drawing were so colorful and happy, it was impossible to believe that he'd made the same one I was holding. My son usually refused to talk to anyone other than me and his dad, so the principal and his teachers couldn't get any answers out of him about the drawing. Once I composed myself, I sat down beside my son and asked him about it. He told me that the drawing was of him flying the kite when his dad took him to the park. I asked if the thing standing behind him was his dad, and he shook his head. He called it his friend. A lump formed in my throat, and I couldn't speak again until I'd swallowed it. I asked him questions about his friend, but he seemed reluctant to answer any of them. Then I asked him what his friend was doing. My son looked at me with the deepest and most honest look in his eyes, and he told me that his friend doesn't do anything. He just stares at him. I don't know what to do. I've been through all of his drawings, and I've been watching him like a hawk. I've instructed the school to watch him closely, but nothing has happened since that day. He hasn't made another drawing. Whenever I bring up his friend, he's always elusive, as if he doesn't want to talk about it or he's too scared to. I don't know who this friend of his is, and I'm not sure what scares me more, his empty black eyes staring down at my son, or the fact that he doesn't seem to have a mouth. Story number 2. In the Window. My daughter loves drawing. She's just like her mother in that way. Her mother is an artist who sells her paintings at art galleries and on road shows. I am a happily married, stay-at-home dad. I love my girls, and I love how they both share a love for art. My wife and I have tried our hardest to feed our daughter's desire to draw and paint. My wife says the only reason she is an artist today is because her father and mother encouraged her love of art. We want to do the same for our little girl. Now, she's only around 8 years old now, so she's no Van Gogh. However, I do believe her talents are growing and her love for drawing is only getting stronger. She spends every free moment she has drawing something in her room. The moment she gets home from school, she'll run straight to her room and pull out the crayons. I love watching her create her masterpiece just so she can show it to me and I can hang it up on the fridge. We're running out of room on our fridge. My wife's main form of income is her gallery, but every so often she'll go on some road show where her and other artists travel around the country with pieces of art to sell them. Whenever she does this, my daughter and I are often left alone for about a month. It was a few days after my wife had left for one of her road shows. It was the weekend, and it was far too hot outside to do anything. All the fans were on, and I was enjoying a cold beer in front of the television. My daughter was doing what she usually does, drawing or painting in her bedroom. She came running downstairs suddenly, calling out for me. I sat up as she handed me her latest masterpiece. It was a drawing of her sleeping in her bed with the night sky shining through her window. I smiled. I'll admit that last beer had hit me kind of hard, so I didn't really give it a proper look. She asked me what I thought of the drawing, and I told her it was brilliant, as I usually did. I stood up and she followed me to the kitchen, where I managed to find a space for her drawing on the fridge. She was always so happy to see another one of her drawings going up on the fridge. To her, it was similar to her mother's art gallery. I gave her a soda and she went outside to play for a bit. I sat and watched her from the shade of the porch. The walls around our garden are low, and I've never really trusted the neighborhood we lived in. Whenever she went outside to play, either my wife or I would always watch her. Things can happen in a blink of an eye, and there are some dark people in the world. That same night, I tucked my daughter into bed and went into the kitchen to clean up the mess from dinner. I was exhausted, but at least the beer had cleared my system by then. I packed the leftovers into the fridge, and when I closed the door, something caught my eye. I already admitted to not paying too much attention to the drawing my daughter gave me that day. I leaned down and peered at it. There was something off about it that I didn't quite catch the first time I saw it. I stared at that drawing for what felt like the longest time. That's when I spotted it. The drawing seemed so innocent at first. It was just my daughter, sleeping in her bed, and the moon and stars shining in the night sky outside her window. There was something else in her window, something that I didn't see the first time. There were a pair of eyes on the outside of her window, staring in as my little girl slept in her bed. My heart pounded in my chest. All the blood rushed to my head. I felt sick. I felt like I was going to faint. At the same time, the blood in my veins boiled, and my face felt hot with anger. I snapped out of it and rushed to my daughter's bedroom. I threw the door open, and she turned to look at me, confused and squinting at the light behind me. I glanced at her window. There was no one there. Still, that sick feeling inside of me grew. I grabbed her out of her bed and carried her into my bedroom on the second floor. She slept in my bed that night, and in the morning I made some calls. I called my wife, but she didn't know what we could do about it. I called the police, and they said there was nothing they could do about a little girl's drawing. When my wife got back home, we had a security system installed around the house with motion-sensing lights and cameras. We haven't caught anyone yet, but I still get sick to my stomach whenever I think about how someone was staring at my little girl through her bedroom window while she was asleep at night. Story number 3. My Big Sister. Children are easily bored, and I don't blame them. I get bored if I don't have my phone, laptop, or at least a book in front of me. Music helps to cut through the boredom a little, but my body gets fidgety and my mind becomes restless if I don't have anything to do. I feel like, in some way, I relate to children a lot because of that. I guess that's why I got into babysitting. I mean, I needed the money as well. There's nothing quite like being a teenage girl with parents who won't buy you anything because they say you have to earn the things you get. So, I got into babysitting with a few kids around in my apartment block around 3 years ago. I actually enjoy it. I get to spend the day goofing around, and I get paid for it. There are a few bad things that have happened, like one kid falling off the couch when I wasn't looking and hitting his head on the coffee table. He was okay, but that experience stuck with me. I'm more vigilant now, maybe too vigilant. A new family moved into an apartment on my floor. They have a sweet little girl, and it wasn't long until some of the other parents recommended me to them as a babysitter. They were busy parents, so I ended up looking after their daughter a lot. She was sweet and quiet, so we got along well. She mostly sat on the floor in the living room with her crayons and coloring books. I got to sit with her and read or watch TV. I should stress that I don't know much about this family. They're kind of secretive. I don't know where they go when they leave me to babysit. I only know about their daughter, and even she keeps to herself. One day, the parents had knocked on my door suddenly and begged me to watch their daughter for a few minutes. I was busy doing homework, but they were so desperate that they offered to pay me double my rate. So I agreed. I took my homework with me to their apartment and watched as the parents locked me in with their daughter. She was lying on her stomach on the living room floor, playing with her crayons. I shrugged it off as a family emergency or something and sat down next to her with my homework. We both worked quietly for a few minutes. Then, she suddenly looked up at me and asked if I wanted to see her drawing. I was stunned. My wide eyes and gaping mouth probably gave that away. In all the time I'd been looking after her, she never actually talked to me. When I said that she was quiet, I mean she was really quiet. Whenever I heard her talk, it was when she was asking her parents for something while I was around. This was the first time she'd talked directly to me. I smiled and nodded. She grabbed her piece of paper and crawled over to me on her knees. She sat down beside me and placed the drawing in my hand. So, I can't really explain what I was thinking when I looked at it. It was a child's drawing after all. The drawing just showed a little girl standing on some grass on a sunny day. I figured the little girl was her. There was some kind of creature next to her, holding her hand. It had a big round body and long, sharp claws. It also looked like its mouth was filled with small, pointy teeth. It was hard to tell, but it still kind of freaked me out. She told me that she showed the drawing to her parents, but they didn't like it, which is why they left. That seemed strange to me, so I asked her about the drawing. I asked if it was a drawing of her and a pet or something. She said no. A chill ran up and down my spine at what she said. She told me that the girl in the drawing was her big sister, and the creature was the thing that killed her. I might have overreacted, but as soon as her parents got home, I walked out and told them I'd never babysit their daughter again. Like I said, children are easily bored, but if that was her way of having fun, then I wanted no part of it. That drawing freaked me out, and I would never be able to look at their daughter the same way again. What if she was telling the truth?